let's actually talk about shipping, because I feel like this is like part of why or this question that I'm about to kind of pose, but it's not going to actually be a question. But I remember once we were talking about, this really is kind of changing the subject, but once in Bojangles, randomly, Bojangles.
You like emphasize the jangle.
Bojangles. Bojangles.
My grandma calls it Joe Bangles.
But it was you, me, and Shannon, and somehow we brought up shipping, and I was saying how like it's like you want to put two people on a ship and you want to send them off to an island by themselves or something like that, which I'm obviously very proud of myself for thinking of. And we had that whole conversation of like, well, I don't know, it's kind of like the author didn't intend it that way, and I don't know. You don't remember this at all? Because I can't remember if you asked me to explain it to you, because I feel like you knew what it was, but...
See, I think I knew what it was, but I was going through this in my head. I don't understand. I do, like, there's 50-50. Like, I halfway understand shipping and why people do it, but at the same time, I don't. And part of it is because I'm not the author, so, like, I don't have the power to say who fits with who.
Yeah.
But at the same, like, I think it depends on the fandom and on what you're talking about, because, for instance, with Harry Potter, like, a lot of people ship Harry and Hermione together, but that makes no sense to me. Like, like I would not put them together. I don't, and I think it's because that has been so well written, and she's developed this character so well that I trust her to put them with the right person. But with something else where I think maybe they cater too much to the fans, or it's an obvious story, kind of like with Immortal Instruments. Like, I don't know how that ends, but I kind of already can see that it's going to be with Jace and Clary getting together, just because that's what most people will want to happen. But, you know, if I read more or watch more movies, if they make more of the movies, then I think, for right now, I don't want them to get together. I don't think they fit together. So I understand, like, if I ship, like, Clary with somebody else or Jace with somebody else, I can understand that. I don't know. I
also feel like you, like, just as a person, tend to be more, like, I guess, like, loyal would be the word, or, like, I don't know. I feel like the way that I'm explaining this is just going to make you sound like you're, like, gullible or something. But it's more that, like
gullible's fine. I'm okay with that, because I think I know what you're going to say.
See, but that's not what I mean. But I'm more, like, committed to, like, what it is kind of thing. Like, if someone says, I intended this to be this way, then you'll be like, all right, well, I'm going with your intention because I'm loyal to you and I'm loyal to, like, what you wanted this to be kind of thing, instead of, like, manipulating it, which manipulating also sounds bad, but I don't know.
Instead of reading between the lines.
Yeah, or instead of kind of, like, putting your own, like, interpretation, you more sort of, like, allow them to inform you, like,
I think
you're like a good listener.
Yeah, and I think
in reader form.
I take that as a compliment, because I do, like, I cannot say what you're trying to say, like, and I think that way for everybody. Like, if they have written something and the majority of the people take it this way, but they meant it to be a different way, I'll see both of those, but I will trust that the way they meant it is the real way, because they wrote it. Like, nobody else is in their brain.
Right. I also, like, think that part of it is kind of, it's actually weird for me sometimes, because I feel like shipping was never called shipping, or, like, when, like, not for me. It feel like it was more like, sometimes you would refer to, like, a specific, like, a really, really, really popular pairing as a ship, but, like, it definitely wasn't used as, like, this weird, like, verb thing, and, like, Twitter wasn't a thing, like, there wasn't as much, I feel like I'm talking like I'm, like, 75, but back in the day, there wasn't as much interaction, which is actually, I mean, says something about how quickly, like, technology and stuff has changed to think of how different it was, like, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But there wasn't as much interaction between you and whoever that, like, you're writing about or that you're reading about or whatever that you ship. So there was less of, like, I I guess just like people didn't know about it kind of thing, or like it wasn't like something that you openly talked about or something.
I also think maybe you didn't, like people, it was a transmission, like you're watching what happens, not like I want this to happen, maybe it will, or not, like as you said, control, like you don't have the.
You mean now?
Then, like it was just that I'm gonna watch what's happening, like, and that's the way it is, not like that shouldn't be how it is, we should make it this way, so I'm gonna make it this way in my head, you know?
That's true. You know, at first I was like, I don't know, but actually, yeah, because I feel like it's so, like for me, ships, or I would more likely call them like pairings, are more tied to me, they come from like fan fiction specifically.
Yeah.
And I feel like now people sort of use them in general to like talk about like we want these people to get together, or like kind of thing, like without it being attached to anything.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you could write something without feeling like the person who, like the original author, or like if it's like real person fiction, like the original people that you're writing about, are ever going to see it. Like, so it's kind of like lessons that, like, or I don't know, I guess like it's sort of like on both hands, where like on one hand it seems more real, and on the other hand it seems more just like something that you're, like that you have in your mind, but like it doesn't involve anyone else kind of thing.
Yeah. I have two things to say about that. I also don't, okay, this comes from when for like 2 months, or longer than that, but back when I would read, I was more into fan fiction in like high school and stuff, and I never wrote, or I wrote stuff but I never posted it because I knew that I could never peg down the character. Like I knew that what I was saying is what I would want to happen and not what the character would actually do, and I think that has a lot to do with why I don't ship people, or I don't trust shippings, is because I think a lot of it is what the fan wants without what the characters would actually do. And a good point is like, and I'm not going to say too much because you haven't watched it, but in Veronica Mars, there's a point in time where I was like, holy crap, I want these two people to get together so bad. But I don't consider that shipping. It was just like, I think they have such great chemistry right now, they need to get together. And then like a couple of seasons later, I don't think they're good for each other anymore. So like, I think people view shipping as like a permanent thing, like they should be together with this person, period, instead of they work well together now and later they don't. Like I think kind of like with Buffy, like would you want Willow to be with Oz or Tara in season 6? You know, like I think Oz is great for her in the beginning, but I think she changes as a person, you know, and obviously he would too. So then do they fit? Would you still ship them, quote unquote?
I also feel like just the word shipping to me has the connotation of everyone else, or everyone else's opinion, like as far as like, this is what I like, this is the ship that I'm like behind or whatever, and this is the one that you like, kind of thing. Where if you're, and then also I kind of have to wonder, like, why do we always have to put people together? But that doesn't always happen necessarily. Like, it's not like everyone sees it that way, but it's kind of like, I don't know. I almost feel like shipping has become, or at least like in people who aren't necessarily involved in fandom, like that's become the only way that they
can interact,
see it in a way. Or like, some people are like that, where it's like they can't really like something unless they have a ship. But I feel like sort of like how everyone sees One Direction fans as like screaming teenage girls. I feel like that's how people see like fandom, especially like on like Twitter and Tumblr and stuff like that. They just see them through like, oh yeah, like I know everyone like in that fandom like ships this, or like that's like the primary interaction.
With Supernatural, how everybody ships them together. Like,
yeah.
That makes no sense to me because one, they're brothers, but another, like even more so, like their relationship works because they are brothers. Like if they were in an intimate relationship, I don't think they'd be right for each other at all.
See, I feel like this is also where I sometimes wonder if shipping is actually what it what it portrays itself to be. Because sometimes it's like, I mean, there's no mistaking that. Some people definitely intend, like, I want these people to be together romantically or sexually or whatever, and that's what I want. And then in other cases, I feel like it's almost more concentrating on, like, there's, like, maybe, like, a romantic relationship there, but what it's actually getting at is, like, the dynamic between the two characters, like, but, like, converting that into a relationship in a way. It's like, go ahead.
Well, what do you mean? Like, do you mean that, like, you can ship a person together friendship-wise?
I mean, I feel like some people, like, refer to it as that, but I'm more so saying that, like, the general concept of shipping, like, is usually portrayed as two people in a romantic relationship, which it can be. But, like, even in that case, I sometimes wonder if the point, not the point, but, like, the reason why it's so, what's the word, like, not appealing, but kind of like where that's sort of the first place you want to go sometimes when you watch something is, like, who do you ship, or, like, whatever, like, why that's the first question is less about who you think is attracted to each other or who you would want to be together, and more about what types of characteristics do you identify with, kind of.
Yeah.
Like how I was talking to Shannon, like, when we did our episode about how, like, historically, and it's not necessarily the case anymore, but historically, but, like, in the past, I was always more, like, drawn to pairings where it was, like, two best friends. I just bit my tongue really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was unexpected and it hurt. But where it was, like, two best friends, not necessarily, like, best friends where you feel like it'd be weird if they were together, but, like, just, like, I don't know, just best friends. Whereas two friends realize, or, like, one person realizes that, oh, wait, this whole time I've, like, been in love with you, kind of thing, and then it progresses to a relationship. That used to be more what I was attracted to. And then I was thinking, well, to an extent, what if that's not necessarily about those two characters, and it's more about those are characters that I am drawn to in that, like, a type of relationship, like their best friendiness that I'm drawn to, and express in, like, a romantic way, but it's not really about the romantic part. That's just the part that, like, everyone does, kind of thing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do.
Yeah, I mean, not to take away from, like, because I think there is, like, as far as, like, shipping people together romantically, I do think that that is important, or as far as, like, has meaning behind it. But I don't know, I also kind of think it could be more or less than that, depending on the person, or depending on, like, intentions, you know? But I do agree that, like, it's kind of weird to think of it as, like, you know, as someone who's not familiar with fan fiction or fandom or whatever, to think of how, like, odd it sounds, or, like, I mean, maybe that's why people, like, usually don't talk about it or something, because it's just one of those things where it's kind of like, well, you wouldn't understand. But also, it's hard to say, like, and this is kind of where I guess this specific podcast comes into play, because there was someone on Tumblr was, you know, made a post about how, like, people need to remember that fandom isn't just fan fiction kind of thing. And so it's kind of hard to even say, like, someone who's, like, outside of fandom and someone who's within it, because you're usually just talking about what you're familiar with. Like, what I'm familiar with is people who write and read fan fiction. Yeah. But even, like, within that, like, I was just talking about podfic earlier before we started recording, but, like, stuff like that, there's, like, so many different facets that I'm not familiar with. Like, I've never gone to a convention and, like, stuff like that, where it's like, well, that's participating in fandom, but it's not necessarily participating in this one specific section.
I think shipping is also weird because it's always been done, but there hasn't been a word for it. Like for instance, you know,
like how some people talk about, like, or I don't know if you do know, but like there's a lot of people who are like Corey and Sean were my first ship before I knew what shipping was. That's like a common like saying on Tumblr. But
see, once again, I don't understand. I mean, I wouldn't put them together because I don't know. Also, Ryder Strong is in an episode of Veronica Mars, which makes me very happy.
Oh.
And Sam Levine, is that his name? The guy from Freaks and Geeks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's in it too. In the exact same episode. Anyway, I just watched it the other day. That's why I'm like, okay. But anyway, I guess like in a nutshell, I do quote unquote ship. Like, for instance, with the whole Buffy thing. Like I asked you the last time we were watching it.
Wait, sorry to interrupt you, but that's kind of like. No, go ahead. I'll write it down so I don't forget.
Okay. Well, that's like the last time we were watching it out here. I asked you, out of everyone Buffy dates, who do you want her? Like, who do you like her with the most, or who do you think? And
is best for her.
Yeah, and so in a nutshell, again, I'm saying that, but I asked you who do you ship her with, you know?
Right.
But I guess. For me, the problem I have with shipping is that it makes it this thing instead of like
it like kind of isolates
it, and
like,
it like distances it from the actual fandom you're talking about.
Yeah.
Even though it's the exact same question, even though I think we all do it. Like even in Harry Potter, there are moments where I don't like him with Ginny.
Yeah.
But
see, that's what I was going to kind of interrupt you with is like, well, then it's kind of like, well, like what separates shipping from just wanting two people to be together. But I feel like part of shipping to me is like pairings that aren't canonical. I hate that word.
I don't know what that means.
Like if canon is like everything that actually happens in the show or whatever makes up canon, then if something's canonical, it is in the show.
You shipping is like something that would not happen.
Yes, but
then
it's not supposed to. I feel like shipping can be any pairing, but I feel like the reason why it's separated as like calling it like shipping is primarily because of those types of pairings. Like I know like people like I'm not even gonna attempt this. Damn it, I was gonna bring up like an example where it's like in Sherlock, but I couldn't even think of like who he's often like put with. I feel like the natural thing would be Watson, but I'm not positive. But anyways, but like stuff like that where it's like it's not.
So like in Supernatural,
it
would never happen.
So then that would be called like shipping because it's like but see then that I feel like comes out of like assuming that people who quote unquote ship are the intention is to go against what the show is. But I feel like that's not always the intention.
But then my question would be, if shipping is non-canonical, is that what you said?
See, I hate that word. I can't use it. But anyway.
Then like why? That's like saying I want God and the devil to be together just because they would never.
Whoa.
But like.
I bet there's fan fiction out there like that. Go ahead.
Why, if that would never happen? So why would you ship them together? Like that's like.
See,
saying,
but I think it's that whole thing of like just interpretation of like. Not necessarily like this would happen or like even like getting away from like thinking of putting people together and more sort of like fan fiction as far as like story and what happens. I feel like it's not always like and see this is where it becomes difficult to explain fan fiction to people because it's not always like you take the story and what could possibly happen afterwards or what could possibly have been going on at this time. You can also just sort of like take the idea of like or like the concept or something or whatever and right within or outside of that world. But so I feel like I don't know, it's hard to really like because I'm also part of this podcast I feel like is me figuring out how to interpret this thing that's been part of my life for like such a long time, but it's like there's no words for it to a certain extent. But like
so basically you're kind of saying that in fan fiction and with shipping, you can take two characters, put them in completely different situations, and being true to those characters, they would end up together.
Yeah, or like I feel like it's more sort of about your interpretation of the characters themselves.
Okay.
Like how well can you, I mean, it's different for different people.
And I agree, and I think that's the thing is like, for instance, with you, if you told me, you know, I think I quote unquote ship Sam and Dean Winchester together, I would ask you why, and then you would have a good reason for it. But, and I'm not a huge fan fiction reader, so that might be part of it. I feel like in general, when people ship people together, there isn't a good reason behind it. Like they can explain it to me, and I'm like, no, they would not work.
See,
together.
that's the part where it becomes like, you know, I become, I guess, wary of even trying to like really define it because it's so hard. I feel like my instinct or like my knee-jerk reaction is to say like, well, it's like this across the board. But then like through doing this podcast and through sort of like being a part of fandom as an older like person that can think more outside of myself, I feel like I'm starting to realize that people are always in it for like completely different reasons. Like I perceive certain things differently as far as like shipping, or even just as far as like what do I look for in like a fan fiction, like a story that I would want to read. Like I feel like now, you know, to get back to what I was saying, now I'm more drawn to like, can this person write this character or this person really spot on? Is this something that they would do even if it's in a completely different situation or even if it's in the same situation? Whereas before, I feel like I was more drawn to like kind of an exciting / romantic story, depending on what it was about.
And that, I agree completely. And that, I think that's why I never got really into fan fiction, is because I always wanted it to be real. Like I wanted it to be true to the people, and I could never do that. Like what I wrote and how I interpreted things was always manipulating the character to do what I wanted them to do.
Yeah. See, and then I kind of just wonder, like, I feel like that almost makes me sound snobbish, like, oh, well, it's not what would really happen kind of thing, but
I don't think it makes you sound snobbish. I think it's just that we have gotten to a point, maybe it is the fact that we're older, where we can see things that...
It is much more connected to, like, my experiences with people, like, sort of in the way that people are the same throughout their life kind of thing, like how when I first met you, for instance, which was years ago, you were a completely different person, but at the same time you're exactly the same person. I feel like I didn't really have much of a grasp on that when I was younger, or like how we would always talk about like our soulmates are going to be like this, and this, and this, and like I used to think of, I guess, characters or like people as like they're made up of all these pieces and like just put them in order in a story and I'm fine. And now I'm more, I also feel like it's kind of the same thing with One Direction, where I feel like I like them in a similar way to like the way that I liked things when I was like a young teenager, but it's also completely different, where I feel like I'm looking for something different, or I'm, you know, I don't know, I interpret them differently or something.
That's where it goes back to the whole timing of everything, because like we were talking about, if we were into them, I don't think we would have been, but if right now happened when we were in high school and everything was exactly the same, it was just when we were in high school, I'm not sure I would like them like I do.
Yeah, which is kind of like, I also think too that part of to kind of connect both of these conversations, I feel like part of the propeller behind me sort of being able to get so wrapped up and be like at peace with it has to do with like sort of getting back into fandom in a way. Which is interesting, because I feel like, I mean, I never really left, but
you're just reconnecting.
Yeah, or like it just became significant again, or I found myself.
Sorry. You can blame. No, I thought it was going to be a One Direction tweet, but it's not.
But but yeah, or like I find myself like, you know, I don't know.
Like it's relevant.
Like staying up late at night, like reading fan fiction, which I haven't done since I was 15. Yeah. So, you know, staying up way too late.
Yeah.
I feel like this conversation could keep going, but I'm trying to keep these episodes down to like 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, have fun cutting that now.
Okay, well, that's okay. But
I feel like we covered a lot of good
I want to
topics.
keep talking though. It's okay.
Well, we can keep talking without recording.
Yeah. Or we can just keep recording.
That's true. And you can just choose what to put in and put out.
I don't know. Well, I mean, to get back to shipping, because there literally is so, it might be a two-parter. There's literally
two-parter!
Yeah. But so much to talk about. But I also feel like part of it is like, or like maybe, you know, I guess like the weirdness for me as far as it becoming quote-unquote mainstream, which it's not mainstream, but whatever, has a lot to do with like, okay, I'll say this and then I'll kind of backtrack a little bit. Has a lot to do with like sexuality weirdness, because like for instance with like Supernatural, which I feel like is one of the most popular fandoms, not necessarily because the show is the most popular thing, but because the way that the fans act is so integrated and so visible kind of thing. Wait, where are you going? Oh, okay. It's okay. But like the fact that like people ship Dean and Sam together, I feel like people think that's like so weird. I mean, I not necessarily weird, but I kind of, it doesn't appeal to me. But like I feel like that's sort of the thing that people latch onto because it's like shocking in a way, or like it's like, I guess the word would be like deviant or something.
And that's kind of what I have a problem with, is because it is the shock factor that they go for, and not the being true to the characters.
Yeah. You know, that's interesting because, oh God. See, I feel like this is, anytime like I feel like a lot of this podcast ends up being me being embarrassed about the things that I used to be into. But,
I used to be into Billy Gilman, so don't worry.
I mean, not that I'm worried, but I just feel like how we were talking about before, how like now I'm more sort of interested in like characterization or something, or like that's like the number one thing that I look for, which I also feel like has to just deal with me personally, or I don't know, everyone kind of grows up and they like different types of like literature and stuff. But I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to reading that. Ooh, sorry. What was that, your phone?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, with your phone.
I apologize.
But it would have to be something where it was, the key thing was like realism, like where it wasn't that like, ooh, they get together and it's forbidden, but it's also kind of sexy. Like, not like that. It would have to be something where it's like, how would be if like, oh, are you laughing about Winnie? I don't think you could hear it. I don't think you could hear it.
Okay.
But yeah, it would, that's the only thing is like realism. I feel like I can read most things. I feel like some people, I don't know. Some people are more like put off by certain types of content, whereas I'm not, but I'm more put off by like sort of the intention behind it. If I can tell that if it's like this person is trying to come off as this certain way, or like, I guess like titillating would be the word.
Yeah.
That's a weird word.
I don't think this is exactly what you're talking about, but it's a good example for me. Like in Twilight, how everybody, like it was either Team Jacob or Team Edward. Like, Jacob never made sense to me because there's absolutely no way in my head that they would match, that they do match. I mean, he loved her. That was it. Like, there's nothing about her that I could put with Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
So it never made sense to me that there was a team Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of it is to go like to what the fans want, because I think with fans and with fan fiction, like for me, for instance, when I was into fan fiction, I feel like a lot of people use it to put themselves in the situation, and I think that's what a lot of people did with Twilight, is that they chose for Bella what they would want, not what Bella would do.
That's also interesting because I feel like, well, first of all, I wanted to say that something that I haven't really thought of before is that there is a part of me that sees things like through like fan fiction goggles, and there's a part of me that just sees things as they are in the show. And so I feel like if I'm watching the show, I turn like the other ones off, and then when I'm not, I turn it back on, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so there's like kind of or like kind of how you were saying, like, this is not what would happen in the show, or like this is how it was intended to be. Like, it's sort of like I see that, and then I also see like my reinterpretation of it completely separate. And sometimes my interpretation goes along with the show, but sometimes it doesn't too. But or like other things, not just shows. But also that's important too, is that like the first time I think I ever really read fan fiction was probably about Lord of the Rings, maybe. Something like that. That's, very popular. And I feel like most of it was like, or actually probably The Outsiders. I don't know if that was first, but that was the first one that like I read a lot of. And a lot of the stories were like, so and so, like some girl gets dropped into the story and she's like, oh my god, and then she has to interact with them.
Yeah.
Like kind of, that kind of scenario. And I feel like now, at least the stuff that I'm familiar with tends to be more sort of like people really cleverly, I guess expressing some interpretation that they have of canon. Which to me, and now here's where I start to feel, and I know it's not arrogance necessarily, but I start to feel almost like I'm putting down people who write the other stuff. But to me, that is like more skillful or something, or it's almost like showing like for instance, like if I feel like someone writes a character really well, like it's like so impressive to me. Like it's like the same thing, or it's the same. It requires the same amount of talent as someone who writes like an original, novel or something like that.
See, I agree, and I kind of like that was kind of my point earlier. Is that like when it's like the author is writing it, or it's like when I can see it happening, when it fits, when everything is the same, when the character is the same, or acts as if they would in a different situation, that's when I'm impressed, and that's when I really enjoy fan fiction. It's like when I got really into Labyrinth, I started reading some fan fiction, and there was some that was good, and then there was like one that was like, holy crap, backstory. I mean, it took like the plot line and just like expanded it huge amounts, and it like kept go. I was so impressed with it, and it was spot on for the characters. Like I could see them doing that.
Do you remember what it was called?
The 13th Hour.
Okay. Because I also kind of, I mean, I don't think I've been doing this, but I also did kind of want to do like a, what have you been reading lately? Like what have you been reading lately, or like what are you stuff now kind of thing. So it's good though to have like that. I might need to write it down. The 13th Hour.
And then there was another one, but she stopped writing it. that was like a Jane Austen kind of like feel to it, and I was just she didn't get far enough into the story where I knew like that the characters were going to be the same, but she added so many different elements, and it was really well written, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was like Pernicious Wills or something like that.
Okay. Well,
I can find that for you.
Okay. Damn it! Now I've forgotten what I was saying before that.
You felt arrogant for being more
impressed. A little bit after that.
That it was skillful to write the character.
Shoot! It was like a good segue too. One Direction. Yes. Okay. Now I remember. I feel like every time that I get into something new, I'm immediately like, okay, but is there good fan fiction for this? So, and it's not that I can't like something without the fan fiction, but I feel like fan fiction sort of, in a way, it almost helps me understand it more or put it in perspective more to kind of see how somebody else interprets these characters or interprets these events or whatever. So I feel like it's also kind of a way to like when you run out of, like, especially with like Teen Wolf, for instance, once you run out of show, it's like, I want to keep going, there's nothing to keep going, I can read fan fiction, kind of thing. Like a way to keep spending time with the characters in a way. And, so, same thing with One Direction, but for some, like, I mean, if we're talking about, like, having fandom goggles on and having real-life goggles on, the real-life ones were very, very, very strong because I was still learning so much about them. And, like, I had just seen the movie. I was really obsessed with the movie. I was really obsessed with, you know, watching interviews and stuff like that. Like, with my Kim, for instance, I feel like my fandom goggles have taken over now because there's nothing really more to learn or, like, there's nothing really new to see because, of course, they're not together anymore. But so I didn't want anything that I read in fan fiction to be drastically different from what it is in real life. So I would usually not read anything that's like alternate universe, like crazy, not in reality. Huh?
Witchy?
That's not witchy, which now, yeah,
no,
now,
no,
obviously it's somewhat changed.
Sorry,
but
no, like because of what you guys were talking about.
I know. I mean, it hasn't completely changed though, because I'm still in that mode of like seeing their real faces, and in a sense, sometimes too, I feel like sort of if I read a lot of like fan fiction that's very like outside of real life, and then I immediately go and like watch an interview, it like there's like a disconnect there, like it's like, whoa, this is not the same thing.
I think I'm not a reader of real fan fiction, like, and by that I mean, like, I would be more okay with reading fan fiction about something that is fiction, like Harry Potter, versus something that's real, because I don't have a good separation thing in my brain. They would blend, and I would end up liking the Harry and the fan fiction more than the real one, and plus, like, I don't want anything to distract me from the real ones, especially because you made such a good point. Well, I don't know if you said it, but it happened in my head that you didn't say it. But like, I'm so new to them that I want to know them before.
It's like you don't want to like corrupt them in a way.
Yeah. Kind of thing.
Which, yeah, I mean, I've kind of moved past that in a way, but but it was weird at first because I feel like I've never been incapable of reading like so kind of like tied to like real something or whatever.
And see, I think though, because like the thought of reading McFly fan fiction, I would be okay with that too.
Yeah.
Because I think you made a good point with the whole My Kim thing, because I do know so much about them now.
Yeah.
Like, I know.
It's like you have like a comfortable hold with them. Like nothing could really change your opinion of what they're like or whatever.
Or what the real ones are.
Yeah.
Who the real ones are.
Yeah. Yeah. But then I also just think it's like one of those things where like everyone's different, and you know, for me, I don't know. I also kind of get like, not that I get bored with real life, but it's, I guess like sometimes I wish that it's kind of like a greedy thing almost, or it's like you want to see what they're like when they're not on camera, even though it's pretty much the same, but, or like you want to sort of feel like you can look into their personal lives without being creepy, kind of thing. And so like to sort of fictionalize it, and I guess it does also say something about how, like, you know, as far as real person fan fiction goes, how like the nature of being famous in a way turns you into a character.
Yeah. Also, I keep thinking about that interview with Liam, with all of them, but where Liam was talking about how either he did get a Tumblr or there was a rumor he got a Tumblr, and everybody was like, get it off now, get everything off now.
Yeah. See, I've always felt weird about that. I don't know where, and I guess it has to do with like Twitter and stuff like that, and like, you know, the fourth wall sort of breaking a little bit between people and the people that they admire. But like, just the idea of people sending them fan, and also, you know, okay, the idea of people sending them fic is weird, because I'd imagine it would be weird for them. But it also makes me oddly like embarrassed of the entire concept of writing fan fiction, but it also makes me in a way sort of irritated with them that like because for some reason I assume that like whoever would have the whatever to send them that wouldn't choose something like truly good. Like they choose something for like the shock value, not the shock value, but like, you know, just something that's sort of like, I don't know, that not I could like go on fanfiction.net and like pick one and they'd send that to them. Yeah. But not something where it's like, okay, you know, like if I was one of them, like, yeah, I know, like I'm not in a relationship with this person, but this is really good. This is really well written. You know, like not something that they could in any way appreciate, and it makes me sort of like, hey, like we're not just, you know, that's not an accurate portrayal. You know.
Is there a fan fiction that deals with Harry and macaroni and cheese? That you know?
Well, as some people say, if it exists, there's fic of it.
The only reason I ask is because Caroline posted a while ago about how she really wanted mac and cheese, or she ate macaroni and cheese, and every bite reminded her of Harry, and the only thing I could think of was...
No, I think that's real. Or, like, I think that, because there's, like, a whole Tumblr that's, like, Harry Styles eating. and I'm pretty sure that, like, he's eating it on stage or something.
That's nice. Macaroni and cheese is a good choice, Harry.
Yeah. But, I mean, but like I said, there's probably a million fan, like, stories or whatever that are derivative of that.
Derivative.
I like that word a lot, too.
Reminds me of calculus.
It reminds me of English. Yeah. Or, like, I remember we talked about it a lot in my, literature and art class in college, of how, like, you know, a story can be derivative of another work.
I understand. I just think that in English, I think of the word derived, and derivative makes me think of math. Because I would say the story derived from. Yeah.
Well, it's the same word.
I know, but I'm just saying the form of it. Yeah. Also, it's starting to not sound like a word anymore.
Yeah. Derivative. Okay. I also want more tea, so I think we can end there and get more tea. It's a good time, Erin. I think we'll do another episode, probably.
Okay. I'm always up for chalk. I was going to say
I'm always up for chalk as well. Okay.